Kent Hovind is a flim-flam artist who's been promoting Young Earth Creationism for over 30 years. He's very prolific. He gives lectures all the time, and he's also been very heavily present on YouTube. There are channels out there that push and promote Kent Hovind's views to the rest of the world. The other thing that Kent Hovind is known for is being a convicted criminal. He's gone to jail for issues related to not paying his taxes as well as structuring payments. He has also been arrested a number of times for domestic abuse charges. So we're not dealing with a great guy here, that's for sure. So, of course, he's known for pushing all kinds of crazy, kooky ideas with regards to Young Earth Creationism, but he's maybe less well known for some of his odd conspiracy-laden ideas. So in this video, we're going to focus on Kent's bizarre conspiracy ideas. We're going to touch on a few of some of the weird ones, but especially we're going to focus on where he's touched on, you can maybe argue as anti-Semitic adjacent to some degree. So I don't claim that Kent Hovind is overtly anti-Semitic, but the fact that he's relying on anti-Semitic resources is deeply troubling, and we're going to look at that. The whole reason why I'm dealing with this is because of a video that Dr. Dan Cardinal from Rutgers recently put up. He had an interaction with Kent Hovind where he talked about, well, he basically pointed out that Kent Hovind basically has this script, that all he does is just go to his script and that's it, and how little he actually understands about evolution, which is really surprising given he's been doing this for like 30 years or so. But Dr. Dan clearly laid it out and pointed out to the rest of the world just how little Kent Hovind knows about this topic that he's been promoting for decades. You should check out that video. So here's a link right here, and see what he has to say. And in fact, here's a little clip I took from his video explaining his position on Kent Hovind.
I want to preface this with, yes, I have long been an advocate for not giving Kent airtime. He's a domestic abuser. At best, he defends pedophiles, and at worst, he covers up for them at Dinosaur Adventure Land. He's a fraud, and he's a well-documented liar. So my position has been that nobody should give Kent the time of day, and I totally cop to the hypocrisy here. I am sorry, I want to say that up front, like, screw that guy.
The other thing that I wanted to point to, though, is that Dr. Dan feels that it's not worth anyone's time to argue with Kent Hovind, and I completely agree with that. I think it is a huge waste of time to argue with someone who is so disingenuous and someone who has been explained these things over and over and over again and refuses to budge even an inch on being explained how wrong he is. It's just like talking to a wall that will, be sarcastic and be very annoying back at you. So it's not worth your time. So I made a comment on Dr. Dan's channel, on his video on Kent Hovind, pointing out that I thought that was really great, but that, one other reason why Kent Hovind is particularly atrocious is because he has, at least historically, talked very favorably about the protocols of the Elders of Zion. So back when I was a graduate student, all the way back in 2001, I used to spend my weekends going to various creationist lectures at churches and other things around the Seattle area. And that was probably a huge waste of time, but I did find it to be very entertaining. Dr. Dan asked if I had video of it, or if there's video of this event. I didn't take video of it when I was there, but I did spend 2 days watching Kent Hovind talk about creationism, and he got into some really weird conspiracy stuff where he talked about the protocols of Zion, as he called it. And so I made a report of this. I also had a friend that was with me who also made a report. I had published this on my student website. That is long gone, but I went to the Wayback Machine to find it, and here it is. So we're looking at her report right here. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, sometimes known as the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, is a deeply anti-Semitic book. It is a fraud. It basically is supposed to be a transcript of the secret meeting of very rich Jews who were organizing and planning on taking over the world. But we have known that the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was a complete fraud. It was copied from a political satire published in French that didn't even mention Jews, and it was converted into this vast Jewish conspiracy, supposedly, in order to take over the world and control the world's finances. So one thing about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is that it has then been the root of deeply anti-Semitic thinking, starting in the late 19th century all the way up till today. It was also used as one of the core reasons why the Nazis persecuted Jews and eventually leading to the Holocaust. It has been the root source of anti-Semitism for nearly a century. Now, there have been published reports of Kent Hovind pushing the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is a webpage on the Southern Poverty Law Center website, where he apparently discussed it in 2001 back in Alabama, and also discussing the fact that he's kind of heavily involved with the Patriot movement. Now, because Dr. Dan had mentioned, was there video of this? I was wondering, can I find video of him talking about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion? I didn't have that video, but I thought since I'm on the Wayback Machine, perhaps I could just go look at his website and see if I can find links to it there. So here's his old website. See, it's got his old picture. It's got all the different parts. And there's that part 5, Foundation for Communism and Nazism, Socialism, and the New World Order. So I was hoping I could find a little bit more information about what was there. So click on the link. And, there's a number of broken links, but there's an outline of his entire lecture. So you can see going on a lot of stuff about Satanism and the New World Order, the main points of the underlying New World Order, evolution, and the foundation of racism. He likes to talk about how Darwin mentioned the favored races, so that was in there too. But then all this weird New World Order stuff is coming up, around communism and humanism and, evolution in the public schools, the Communist Manifesto. So I felt like I'd hit pay dirt, and I could see that there were still links to all these things. I felt like, okay, well, maybe there's links to slides or maybe even videos. So, I thought that I would go ahead and click on one of these links. Unfortunately, that took me to a dead end. There were a bunch of RAM files, which aren't helpful. So RAM files are actually media files, but are just links to other media files, and those are missing. Typically, the Wayback Machine doesn't have a lot of that information, so that was just gone. So I decided to do a Google search just for Kent Hovind lectures, New World Order, see if I could just find it. Lo and behold, I struck pay dirt. I could find the lecture. As Dr. Dan pointed out, he has a script. He basically says the same thing over and over again. And sure enough, this was the exact lecture that I saw over 20 years ago. So this is it. We're going to look at it. We're going to look at some of the clips of Kent Hovind talking about goofy conspiracy stuff, as well as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. So why don't we get to it? So the first thing I want to touch on are the 2 points in which Kent talks about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Turns out he actually talks about a few other adjacently anti-Semitic tracts. So we're going to talk about both of those. I didn't know about this other one, but we're going to learn about it here today. And yeah, pretty hideous stuff. I would not, again, I'm not claiming that he's anti-Semitic per se, but he is drawing on some deeply, deeply anti-Semitic sources for his work, and it's pretty hideous. So let's get to it.
Satan's using all sorts of different people to accomplish his goals of trying to build his one world government. I recommend you read several good books. For instance, The Protocols of Zion. If you can't find that, that lays out the plan for how they're going to rule the world. Fascinating book, about 80 pages, on the plan to rule the world. And they're just telling, here's how we're going to do it. They've admitted it. You may want to get 7 men who rule the world from the grave. Or Des Griffin's book, The Fourth Reich of the Rich. Satan uses those who have lots of money. They seem to fall into his trap more easily of, hey, follow me and I'll give you the kingdom. They have a lot of money, now they want it all. Great book on the Fourth Reich of the Rich. You might want to get that one.
I hadn't heard of the Fourth Reich of the Rich by Des Griffin before. I resaw this clip. He may have mentioned it before when I saw him for 2 days, but you could imagine what your brain is like after 2 days of Kent Hovind. And that was also 20 years ago. What I can tell about the Fourth Reich of the Rich is that it's a deeply anti-Semitic book. At least it has anti-Semitic tendencies. It's mostly talking about that there's this new world order that's being established by the Rothschilds, a Jewish family that had, there's all kinds of weird conspiracy theories about the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers as well, and that they are the ones controlling the world. So it looks like Kent Hovind is relying heavily upon this book, talking about that there's a Fourth Reich, and you can even see from the cover of it that there's a swastika placed in Manhattan, the city that has a very large Jewish population in the United States. So in this next clip, this is another part in the video where Kent talks about the protocols of the Elders of Zion. And this is the part where it kind of makes it clear that he's not specifically anti-Semitic, but honestly, depending upon this kind of literature, this is anti-Semitic stuff. Like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion has been the major source of anti-Semitism across the world for over 100 years. And the fact that he would just be this deeply ignorant and be praising the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a fraud, a complete fraud, it's just despicable. And he's also relying on John Birch literature, so it's clear that he's a Bircher, which is another sort of weirdly, pseudo anti-Semitic organization. It's got all kinds of bizarre ideas. It's just like deeply Alex Jones style conspiratorial thinking. And so let's take a look at this clip.
You ought to read about the conspiracy. There is a conspiracy, there's no question, okay? But I don't think we as Christians need to get nervous or worried about it. There was a conspiracy in the Roman Empire to rule the world. And Jesus didn't spend any time trying to change the Roman government. He just wanted to change individuals one at a time. And our job is not to get busy trying to change the world empire. Just go win souls, okay? You ought to read about the Protocols of Zion. Tremendous. This is from the people this is their plan to rule the world. It's all spelled out. They tried to blame it on the Jews, and there may be some Jewish involvement in this, but I don't think it's the Jews that are doing this. This is the super rich of the world who want to control everything. There's a committee called the Committee of 300. These are the people who meet together and decide when we're going to have a war, when we're going to have a depression, when we're going to have something go wrong with the economy so they can have a crisis as an excuse to bring in some more of their plan for a new world order. The Civil War was created purposely. The Civil War was not over slavery. The war was over states' rights. And Abraham Lincoln passed the first executive order. That was the first time a president went around Congress and by executive order ordered troops to head to the South.
So apparently the Civil War was not about slavery and was in fact about states' rights. So this is a deeply regressive view. Obviously the Civil War was primarily about slavery. That was the main issue. You can look at the constitutions of the states that seceded, and you can see that very clearly. In this next video, we're going to look at Kent's views on Satan's plan to control the world and establishing this new world order, going all the way back to the Founding Fathers and even to the design of Washington, D.C.
The Bible says in the book of Matthew, chapter 25, he separated the sheep from the goats. Interesting. Did you know the goat head has long been the symbol of Satan worshipers? The upside-down, five-pointed star. How many have ever seen one of those before? That's the symbol of the Satan worshipers, those that worship Lucifer. Did you know there's a large percentage of the population that worships Lucifer? They're pretty quiet about it. But many, many years ago, the capital to the United States, Washington, D.C., was laid out so that it would represent Lucifer's head, the goat. The tip of the bottom star is the White House in Washington, D.C. Lucifer is worshipped by many people in our government. Why would some of the founding fathers of our country see to it that the capital of our country is laid out to represent Lucifer? Folks, we have been so deceived in the last few hundred years, it's pretty hard to believe we could be so duped in so many areas.
So let's take a little closer look at this claim that the founding fathers laid out Lucifer's pentagram with the White House at the bottom as some sort of strategy of illustrating that there's a new world order and that like it's going to be ruled by Satan. You know, we're really pro-American here. So the problem with this is that, you know, this map, is the way he has it laid out, is actually missing some of the streets that would make up parts of the pentagram. As you can see over here on the left, this part is missing. So it doesn't actually quite fit his idea. You don't really, there's some articles on this showing that it's actually kind of stupid. So I encourage you to just Google this and look for that. Yeah, he's just a deeply stupid person, and clearly he's just wrong. The thrust of Hovind's lecture is that evolution is somehow a gateway for instituting communism in the United States.
Hitler's Third Reich. Let's talk about a few of these. How does communism and humanism tie in with evolution? Communism is based on the philosophy that there is no God, that man becomes the ultimate authority. In other words, we decide what's right and wrong because there is no God to tell us what to do. The founder of the ACLU said, communism is the goal. I often refer to the ACLU as the American Communist Lawyers Union.
Kent goes on to talk about the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx, so let's take a look at that.
Rights. Number 5, a central bank. And boy, when America got a central bank, it was the beginning of the end for our freedoms. It's called the Federal Reserve System. By the way, Federal Reserve notes are not money. This is actually a Federal Reserve Unit accounting device, nicknamed a fraud, F-R-A-U-D, accounting unit device. Okay, I got it right. This is not money. This is a note. This is a debt note, actually.
Kent goes on to claim that evolution is used to indoctrinate the youth into communism, and he uses Des Griffin's presumably anti-Semitic book, The Fourth Reich of the Rich, as justification for this claim.
Amen. But can you imagine being denied a high school diploma because you believe in creation? You say, oh, that could never happen in America. You better look around, folks. I know you won't make it through very far through secular college if you don't bow down and kiss the sacred cow of evolution. You ought to read about the Fourth Reich of the Rich by Des Griffin and see how Rockefeller used his money to further the communist plan. Communism would have failed miserably if it hadn't been for the American capitalists financing the communist movement in the Soviet Union. A long, interesting, bloody story about how that is. See, the capitalists, like Rockefeller and these guys, they want communism. It's part of a plan to have thesis and antithesis, so later they can bring synthesis, bring the two together again, which is coming soon. Here's the communist rules for revolution. Rule number 1, corrupt the young. Get them away from religion. It's working good in America, isn't it? Number 2, break down the moral virtues. Number 3, encourage civil disorders and a soft government attitude toward crime. They've got a new thing now called 3 strikes and you're out. How about 1 strike and you're out?
In this next clip, Kent goes on to talk about the Illuminati, the Masons, imagery on the back of the dollar bill, and some bizarre conspiracy that George Bush and Margaret Thatcher and a bunch of leaders met in the Great Pyramid on New Year's Eve of the year 2000 to hold some sort of bizarre ceremony. I'm not entirely sure what he's talking about, but I can't find any information on the internet about it, not even like weird conspiracy stuff. So,
in 1776, a man named Adam Weishaupt started a group called the Illuminati, the Enlightened Ones. Remember, Lucifer is the Enlightened One, right? Lucifer was the motivating force behind Adam Weishaupt, who started the group called the Illuminati, and he developed a plan to rule the world. On the back of your dollar bill, you will see a pyramid which has 13 rows of stones representing the 13 degrees of blue lodges of the Masonic Lodge. On top, you'll see an all-seeing eye representing Lucifer, the Enlightened One. You notice the all-seeing eye is not touching the pyramid. There's a gap in there. The whole pyramid would take hours to explain the whole thing, how this really ties in with the New World Order plans. But on New Year's Eve, for the year 2000 celebration, George Bush and Margaret Thatcher and many world rulers got together inside the Great Pyramid at midnight, and they installed a capstone on the Great Pyramid. Great big huge ceremony. Anybody see that on the news about the thing going on in Egypt at the Great Pyramid? Well, there's an awful lot going on over there. It's pretty interesting. At the bottom of your dollar bill, under the pyramid, it's got Roman numerals for 1776, which is the year the Illuminati started. The enlightened ones. Now, that seal was ordered to be put on the bills in 1933. It didn't actually make it to the print until 1935, but 1933 is an interesting year also. That's, according to Terry Cook, he says the Latin on there means announcing the birth of the New World Order without God. Secular, without God. Is there going to be a New World Order?
In this next clip, Kent goes on to explain that the New World Order is going to be placing devices, a chip, into the right hand, and that this is the mark of the beast that will be used to identify people in their New World paradise. It's super weird. And he even points out that there's someone who's working there at the church that actually has the device in them.
There's an organization now called Mondex that's been created. Mondex comes from the two words monetary and dexter. Encyclopedia defines monetary as pertaining to money and dexter as belonging to or located on the right hand. So Mondex stands for money and the right hand. Money from the right hand. MasterCard has 51% ownership of Mondex. Robin Kelly of Mondex International said, "This is the final stage in becoming a global reality. With MasterCard's backing, there's nothing to stop Mondex now from becoming the global standard. You need to watch out for smart cards." They use the SET technology, S-E-T, which stands for Secure Electronic Protocols. It just happens to be Set is one of the Egyptian gods of evil, or Satan. They chose that name on purpose. AT&T and Lucent Technologies, which used to be Lucifer's Technologies, but that's pretty obvious, so they changed the name to Lucent Technologies, has purchased the franchise from Mondex USA. Their symbol is the red dragon, representing Satan. Anybody ever seen that before? Probably on half the telephones in Pensacola, right? Or Janus, the two-faced god. They moved their office deliberately to 666 Fifth Avenue, Manhattan. They wanted to have that address, 666. There are many good books you can read about the New World Order and what's going on, folks, and the mark of the beast, and I recommend you read up on this. I read a lot on the subject. I'm no expert, but I read an awful lot on this topic. I recommend this book by Terry Cook, The Mark of the Beast, or The Mark of the New World Order. Carl Sanders is a friend of mine. He travels and speaks on that. Dean Martin, running that camera right there, has a great presentation that he does on the Mark of the Beast. He brought his stuff tonight. He came over to my house with his equipment, set up his laptop computer, and a little thing about the size of a pack of cigarettes. He put a little chip under his arm and walked past the computer. And poof, up on the screen came name, address, social security number, bank account information, bang, from the chip under his arm. He's got it with him tonight. Ask him about it. He'll show you how it works. Folks, the technology is here now to fulfill the mark of the beast prophecy given in Revelation. Revelation chapter 2. The angel said, I know thy works, or the Lord said, I know thy works and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. I don't know for sure where Satan's seat is, but I think Washington, D.C. would qualify as good as any other place I'm aware of. The tip of the satanic symbol there ends right on the White House. Now, I don't know if that's it or not, but folks, take a look at some of the things happened in the last few years, and you'll say, man, maybe that is Satan's seat right there.
So, more nonsense about the pentagram being etched in the streets of Washington, D.C. I mean, it's just completely bizarre stuff. This next clip, what we're going to see is Kent Hovind talking about that there's a bunch of UN vehicles that are being stationed in the United States for apparently some sort of UN takeover. That also there's a bunch of Soviet vehicles that are biological cleanup vehicles stationed in Mississippi. And after this clip, I'm going to explain what's the story behind those Soviet vehicles. So let's take a look.
There's plans for a new world order. You ever wonder why UN military vehicles are being scattered all over the U.S.? You ever wonder why there are concentration camps being set up? There are portable detention camps, folks, in America. Interesting. You ever wonder why there are Soviet-made biological warfare cleanup trucks in America? What do you need a biological warfare cleanup truck for? Well, to clean up from a biological war. See, they learned with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, if you drop an atomic bomb, not only does it kill all the people, it wrecks all the buildings, right? But if you use biological war, you can kill all the people and you don't have to go back and rebuild all the buildings. So the next war, I suspect, will be a very high usage of biologicals, chemical warfare, like the stuff we sold to Saddam to use on Iran, and later he used it on our troops instead. Maybe that's why about 300 Americans died in the Gulf War, and nearly 30,000 have died since then of Gulf War illness. There's a strong movement to reduce the American military and increase the United Nations military.
So basically, these vehicles in Mississippi were just junk vehicles that were purchased by this retired Air Force colonel who wanted to make some money. Bought them super cheap. They had been decommissioned in the Soviet Union, and he was just trying to earn a little bit of cash. But he had them shipped to Mississippi, where he was from, and they just sat there and rotted and rotted and rotted for years. And this ended up turning into some sort of conspiracy on the right, where people were claiming that this was like going to be where the UN invasion would start, and that they would use these Soviet vehicles to do it. So Kent Hovind's just spouting complete conspiracy nonsense here. So this last clip I'm going to show from Kent's video, you can find the link to the whole thing down below. It's 2 hours. I don't encourage you to watch it, but you can if you want. But the last clip is really basically why he's doing this, why he's so obsessed with evolution and trying to debunk it. And you can see it's for some really deeply kind of insidious reasons that's just utterly bizarre.
One man said in the American Humanist magazine, the turning point in history will be the moment man becomes aware that the only God of man is man himself. Well, I'm sorry, sir, but there's a much bigger God than man. And it ain't you. And he's going to be the judge. There's a war going on. What happened 6,000 years ago, roughly? Satan fell from heaven, and he's decided he wants to rule the world. As I said, the goal is to destroy humanity and build a one-world empire with him in charge. So he lied to Eve and told her she could become like God. And it's the same lie he's used all through history. That's what evolution is all about. The whole idea of evolution, it's the exact same lie that Satan told Eve in the Garden of Eden. You can become like God. Think about it. That's what evolution teaches. Boys and girls, we started off like an amoeba, and we're evolving, and we're getting bigger and better, and here we are today at humans, and if we keep evolving, we get to be God.
So what are we left with? Is Kent Hovind an anti-Semite? I don't think so, at least not publicly. The fact that he relied on such horrible anti-Semitic literature and was heavily promoting it to the point where he was willing to give it, or I guess maybe sell it, to anyone who would call his office, that's really troubling. The fact that he would hand out the protocols of the Elders of Zion to anyone who would call, there's something seriously wrong here. And you can just see that he's got a lot of strange ideas about how the world works. And I don't think that it's all that different. I mean, I haven't found any clips of him talking about the protocols of the Elders of Zion lately, but he's got some weird ideas, as we're going to see right here.
But the dates add up to about 6,000. But in the late 1700s, if you study your history, I was a history minor, I love studying history, this was a time of world history when many revolutions were going on. Some thought the Bible was an obstacle to their political goals. Oh, well, let's eliminate the obstacle. It's called the age of anti-monarchy. Get rid of the king. Most countries had a king or a monarch. They said, we don't like that kind of government. We want the rule of the people. Okay. So there was the American Revolution, the French, the Spanish, the Polish, the Italian, the German, getting rid of monarchy. Well, the Bible says to honor the king. And before we get into all the politics there, forget it, doesn't matter. The fact is, that was a time when people thought the Bible stood in their way.
Apparently, Kent is a monarchist. I didn't realize that's a thing. At least that's what the implication is here. So, some pretty strange ideas from a very strange person. So if you like this kind of video, please hit the like button. feel free to subscribe. I'm planning on making more videos like this, debunking creationism and creation adjacent stuff and conspiracy stuff. I also do a lot of videos on neuroscience and the brain. So thank you very much for making it this far, and we will check you later. Bye-bye.